Picture it. Philadelphia, July 4th, 1776, Independence Hall. 56 delegates gathered in one room. John Hancock at the desk, quill in hand. He signs his name in enormous letters. Then, one by one, the other delegates step forward, take the quill, sign their names, add their commitment, add their signatures to the document declaring America's independence. The room fills with tension, with courage, with the weight of what they're doing, signing away their lives, pledging everything for a cause that might fail. One by one, they sign, until finally all 56 have placed pen to parchment. The Declaration of Independence is signed. America is born. It's one of the most iconic scenes in American history. Reproduced in paintings and sculptures and textbooks in the national imagination, there's just one problem. Almost none of that actually happened. The painting everyone remembers, the one hanging in the Capitol building, isn't even showing the signing. The delegates never all gathered to sign the Declaration on July 4th. Some weren't in Philadelphia, some signed weeks later, some signed months later. Some who voted for independence never signed at all, and some who signed never even voted for it. The story we've all been told is almost entirely fictional, a myth, a creation of art and narrative that replace the actual history. But here's the thing, the real story is far more interesting than the legend. I'm Keith Conrad, and this is Side Quests. Today, the Declaration of Independence, how one of America's most famous historical moments became one of its most misunderstood, and why the messy, complicated, drawn-out reality is actually better than the clean, dramatic myth. The confusion starts with mixing three separate events into one moment. July 2nd, 1776. The Continental Congress votes. Not on the Declaration itself, on the principle of independence. Should the colonies declare themselves independent from Britain? It's a monumental vote. The delegates debate. Some are fearful, some are resolute, and some are uncertain. But eventually they vote, and the vote carries. America declares itself independent. John Adams is exhilarated. He writes home that July 2nd will become America's great national holiday. He believes future Americans will celebrate on July 2nd. Fireworks, ceremonies, the whole nation commemorating the vote for independence. Adams is wrong, but not because the importance of July 2nd isn't understood. He's wrong because of something that happens 2 days later. July 4th, 1776. Congress approves the final wording of the Declaration of Independence. Not the vote. That already happened, but the text, the document itself, the words that explain why they're declaring independence, the preamble about all men being created equal, the list of grievances against the king. After weeks of drafting and revising and debating, Congress approves the final version on July 4th. Not because of the signing, not because of anything ceremonial, because that's when the Declaration was finalized and approved. Then there's the third event, the signing. This is where the confusion deepens. On July 4th, Congress approves the final text of the Declaration, and then here's the key part. They order copies to be printed immediately. That same night, they send the Declaration to John Dunlap, a printer in Philadelphia. They tell him, print this, print multiple copies, get them distributed across the colonies. Americans need to know what we've declared. Dunlap works through the night printing. By morning, he's produced hundreds of copies of the Declaration. These printed broadside copies, called the Dunlap broadsides, are what Americans first read. What spreads the news, what tells the colonies that independence has been declared. But here's what's important. These early printed copies have only one prominent signature. John Hancock, the President of Congress. His signature looms large on the page, famous even before the legend. Plus the attestation of the Secretary, Charles Thompson, but essentially John Hancock is the only person whose name appears on these first printed versions. Why? Because the official parchment copy, the one that would eventually carry all 56 signatures, hasn't been created yet. The Congress approves of the Declaration on July 4th. Dunlap prints copies immediately, but the formal official parchment copy, the document that will be signed and preserved, that doesn't exist yet. It takes time to create. The parchment has to be prepared. The Declaration has to be transcribed onto it by hand. It has to be formal, official, permanent. So on July 4th, when the Declaration is approved and distributed and the news spreads, There is no signing ceremony. There's no room full of delegates putting quill to parchment. There's printing presses running, broadsides being distributed, news spreading, but no signing. The confusion deepens decades later with a painting. It's 1818, 42 years after the Declaration. The nation has survived the war, won independence, established itself as a functioning republic. An artist named John Trumbull decides to paint America's founding moments. He creates a massive canvas, one of the largest paintings commissioned in American history, and he paints the Declaration the moment it was being discussed, the moment it was being created. The painting shows the drafting committee, Jefferson, Franklin, Adams, presenting the Declaration to Congress. It shows Congress gathered delegates in the room the moment the Declaration is being discussed. It's a magnificent painting, historically rich, detailed, accurate in its depiction of what it actually shows, the presentation of the Declaration to Congress. But here's the problem. Over time, people began to assume the painting shows the signing, not the presentation, the signing. Why? Because the painting hangs in the Capitol building, because it appears in textbooks, because it's reproduced endlessly in history books and educational materials, because it's the most famous representation of the Declaration's creation. And gradually, in the national imagination, the painting becomes the signing. People see it and assume they're looking at the delegates signing the Declaration. One painting, one misinterpretation creates an enduring national myth. For nearly 200 years, Americans have believed the signing happened as depicted in Trumbull's painting, all together in one room on one day with all the famous figures present. But Trumbull wasn't even painting the signing, he was painting the presentation. The moment when the document was being introduced to Congress, a masterpiece of historical art that accidentally created a historical fiction, the actual signing took place on August 2nd, 1776. That's when the engrossed parchment copy, the official document written out by hand on parchment, was finally ready and delegates began signing it. But even then, even on August 2nd, not all 56 were present. Some delegates were away on military business, on government business, had left Philadelphia for various reasons. Others hadn't yet arrived. The Continental Congress was a rotating body. People came and went. Delegates from different colonies arrived and departed as circumstances required. So on August 2nd, the delegates who were present signed. But not all of them. The signatures continued over the following weeks and months. A delegate would arrive and sign. Another would come back from military service and add his name. A replacement would be appointed to replace a departing delegate and would sign. The document gradually accumulated signatures over weeks, over months. Some signers added their names in September, some in October, some in November, some even later. One delegate, Thomas McKean from Delaware, didn't sign until 1781, 5 years after the Declaration was approved. So the famous document, the Declaration of Independence with all 56 signatures, was never signed by all 56 delegates at the same time. They never all stood together around the parchment. They never witnessed each other's commitment. They never shared that moment of collective courage that the legend describes. Instead, they signed it singly, gradually, over months, in solitude, knowing the consequences of their names being on the document. And that brings us to why the signing mattered so much. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't symbolic in the way we might think. Signing the Declaration was an act of treason against the British Crown. It carried real consequences, death by hanging. That was the official punishment for treason, confiscation of property. Everything they owned could be seized by British forces. Financial ruin, their estates, their businesses, their wealth, all at risk. Imprisonment, torture, exile. These weren't abstract possibilities. They were real dangers, real consequences that could happen. Several of the signers lost their homes during the war. British forces occupied their estates, burned them, confiscated them. Some signers were captured during the conflict, held prisoner by the British. Others faced financial devastation. Invested in the revolution. Lost everything. Spent the rest of their lives trying to recover. Many spent years wondering whether the revolution would even succeed, whether independence would be achieved, whether their sacrifice would be rewarded or wasted. The signing wasn't a grand gesture, it was a quiet, deliberate act of committing yourself to something that might fail, to something that could destroy you. There's a famous line, probably attributed to Benjamin Franklin, though nobody really knows who said it first, that captures the mood. We must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately. The commitment was real, the danger was real, the cost was real. So why has the myth of the signing persisted? Why do Americans imagine all 56 delegates gathering together in one room on July 4th? Because we like clean stories. One moment, one room, one defining instant when America was born. History is usually messier, more complex, more drawn out. The truth about the Declaration is that it was a process, not an event. Years of growing conflict between Britain and the colonies. Years of tension, of grievance, of escalating resentment. Months of debate in Congress about whether independence was actually justified, whether it was wise, whether the colonies could survive separation. Weeks of drafting and revising the Declaration itself. Arguing over language, debating what should and shouldn't be included. Multiple votes, multiple versions. Changes made at the last minute. The signing happening gradually over months. Delegates signing one at a time. Some weeks later, some months later. A war already underway while the formal documents were still being signed. It's messy, it's complicated, it's human, but it doesn't fit the myth. The myth is cleaner, more dramatic, more satisfying. One man, Hancock, signing his name in enormous letters, all the others following, a moment of collective courage and commitment, the founding of a nation in a single dramatic moment. The reality is more ambiguous, more complicated, less cinematically satisfying, but the myth persists because, despite being mostly untrue, it conveys something that is true. The commitment behind those signatures, the courage, the willingness to risk everything for an idea. Here's the thing about history. Sometimes when you peel away the legend, you find something less dramatic. But sometimes, like with the Declaration of Independence, the real story is actually more interesting than the myth. Because the reality isn't about one moment of heroic signing, it's about a process. About a nation being born slowly, deliberately, through debate and discussion and revisions and compromise. It's about delegates making a commitment that they knew might destroy them. Not in a single dramatic moment, but quietly, one at a time. Over months, each man signing his name knowing the consequences. It's about a printing press running through the night to spread the news. It's about a room full of delegates arguing about what independence means. What it should stand for, whether all men being created equal is really what they believe. It's about compromise, about Jefferson's original indictment of slavery being removed because the Southern delegates wouldn't accept it, because Northern delegates wanted their support, because independence came before principle. It's about a document that was imperfect, that fell short of its own ideals, but that set those ideals in writing anyway, made them something future generations could point to. Could say, yes, this is what we said we believed, this is the promise we made. It's about real human beings making a choice with full knowledge of the consequences. Not as a grand gesture, as a quiet commitment. Each man adding his name, each man knowing what it meant. That's the real story, and it's better than the myth. But beyond just correcting the historical record, there's something important about understanding what actually happened. It matters because myths can distort how we understand our own history. If we think the Declaration was signed in one dramatic moment by all 56 united together, we miss something important. We miss the complications, the disagreements, the people who supported independence but had reservations, the compromise that went into creating the document, the fact that some delegates signed despite not voting for it, the fact that some who voted for it didn't sign. We miss the reality that building a nation involved people with different views, different concerns, different levels of commitment, coming together despite those differences. We miss the understanding that imperfection doesn't negate importance, that a document can fall short of its own ideals and still be a foundation for future growth. We miss the reality that courage is often quiet, private, individual, not always dramatic and collective. Understanding what actually happened helps us understand how nations are actually built, not in single dramatic moments, but through slow, difficult processes, through debate and compromise, through people making quiet commitments knowing the costs. Nearly every American can picture the scene. July 4th, 1776, Independence Hall, 56 delegates signing the Declaration of Independence. The painting is famous, the story is iconic, the image is embedded in our national memory. It's also almost entirely wrong. The Declaration was voted on July 2nd, approved July 4th, signed primarily on August 2nd, and then gradually over the following months. Not all 56 were present on any single day. The printing press spreads the word before the parchment was even signed. John Trumbull's painting shows the presentation, not the signing, but we've mistaken it for the signing for nearly 200 years. The real story is messier, slower, more complicated, but it's also more human, more interesting, more real, because the commitment behind those signatures didn't come from a single dramatic moment. It came from deliberation, from debate, from compromise, from individual men, one at a time over the course of months, adding their names to a document, knowing it was treason, knowing it could destroy them, not in a moment of theatrical courage, but in quiet commitment, each man choosing, each man signing. That's the real Declaration of Independence. Not a myth, a history, and it's better than the legend.